everyone, my name is Elle Fordyce, and for my research this year for honours, I decided to look at the combined effects of glycerol concentration and the equilibration time on bovine sperm motility. So a little bit about myself. I'm from Rockhampton, Queensland. I work full-time for Beef Breeding Services, and we are a bovine and equine reproductive company. So we specialise in the collection and processing of bovine and equine semen. So we use two methods of collection, the artificial vagina and the electroejaculation methods. And currently we use Trilodil as our cryoprotectant agent. So that's a pre-made cryoprotectant, but for the purpose of my research, I used my own recipe just so I could control the levels of glycerol within the solution. So we also use a pre-programmed freezing box, and we store all of our frozen semen in liquid nitrogen canisters and in large liquid nitrogen vats on site. So sperm is a very resilient substance. However, during the cryopreservation process, there are a number of factors that can contribute to the damage of the cell membrane. So that will cause either death of the sperm cell or will cause severe injury, so it's inviable to actually fertilize an egg. So these include cold shock. So cold shock occurs during the first cooling process. So you're cooling that sperm down to about 4 degrees, and that's before you start adding your B diluent and actually freezing it. So that will be observed under the microscope. You'll see the sperm cells swimming in a circular direction, and that's just because there's been a change in temperature. So it's either increased or decreased, too high or too low for the sperm cell to survive or function within. You also will have osmotic pressure, so that is when you're adding your B diluent or a solution to the sperm that's too high in concentration, or you're adding it too quickly. So you'll see a mass efflux of water from the sperm cell, and that will cause dehydration and the rupture of the sperm cell membranes, and most often death of the cell. You'll also see cryo-injury, so that occurs during the freezing process of the semen. That is when the ice crystals form both intracellular and extracellular, and it can be exacerbated by the presence of bovine seminal plasma proteins. So we do want to watch out for that. We often operate on the basis that 50% of semen will die during the freezing process, so you will have 50% unviable semen when you do your post-thaw results. So that's saying if you have 60% fresh motility, you put it through the cryopreservation process and you'll come out and you'll have about 30% motility, which is our base industry standard. So while that is pretty poor, it does open a huge opportunity for us to increase and better our cryoprotectant agents and our sperm processing methodology. So as I've said, we use cryoprotectant agents to protect the semen cells during the freezing process. So we function with about 2 different cryoprotective agents. The first one is a permeable CPA. So these are solutions such as glycerol, and they are smaller molecules, so they're able to work both intracellular and extracellular. And they mostly function to really balance the concentration gradient between the intracellular and extracellular solutes. We also work with non-permeable CPAs. So they are with molecules such as egg proteins and milk proteins. They're mostly in our B diluent, and they really only work extracellularly because they're such large proteins. They can't diffuse across into that cell membrane. And their main function is to sequester and stop the growth of ice crystals that have already formed, or to prevent them forming in the first place. So as you can see here, we have our permeable CPA that has diffused across into the cell through that cell membrane. You also will have this non-permeable CPA, which as you can see is attached to these ice crystals here. And you'll have your solutes. So your solutes are sort of what's balancing out between that permeable CPA. Down here, as I've said, we've got the ice crystals, so that non-permeable CPA have bound up and preventing that from increasing during the freezing process. And up here we've got the bovine seminal plasma protein. So as you can see here, this one has attached to that cell membrane, and during the freezing process will most likely cause damage if it's unsequestered by those non-permeable CPAs. So as I said, glycerol content and the ability for it to diffuse across that cell membrane is really essential during the cryopreservation process. Christopher Polch, back in 1949, he first discovered the beneficial effects of glycerol and really utilised that within his studies. As I said, it's a cryoprotectant, however, high levels of it can cause toxicity and the death of the sperm cells, and that's because of that dehydration that I was speaking about. But low concentrations can be really ineffective in the cryopreservation process and can actually kill it as well. So as I said, it's an intracellular and extracellular cryoprotective agent, and we do need to allow for that equilibration time for it to diffuse across into the sperm cell membrane. So this is my experimental design. We worked on a 2x3 factorial design, and it was analysed using a simple general linear model. So we used glycerol and equilibration time as the fixed effects. So for my high glycerol content, I had a 12% as my high glycerol and 4% as my low glycerol percentage. Currently at work we use 12%, and while that does use, it yields acceptable motility, I did think that there was definite areas for us to improve in. So I wanted to see if changing that equilibration time has an effect on that postal motility, to see if we could increase that with the high glycerol. And also with the low glycerol, it's at 4%. So there's a lot of studies suggesting that 7% is probably the perfect range. And I wanted to have a look at the 4% to see if, while we're using lower levels of glycerol, whether letting it equilibrate for a longer period of time does provide as effective protective mechanisms. So at work we use a 10-minute interval for the equilibration time of adding our diluents. So I just went 10 minutes below to 0 and 10 minutes above to 20. So I'm very lucky to work with a fabulous client named Darren Hamblin. He owns Strathdale Wagyus and also Arama Downs. So as anyone who works with cattle knows, they're extremely unpredictable. And so my biggest problem in first doing this was reducing my compounding variables. So on center, I was looking at, we had a range in age, a range in motility, a range in breed, which all contribute to the postal motility. So then I went to Darren, and he pretty much let me have free range of his yearling bulls. We used black Wagyus aged 18 to 23 months. And initially I started with 8 Wagyus, except due to their motility examination, we had to drop 3 from the project. They all grew up on the same property, so they had similar herd experience, similar handling, similar husbandry, more reducing those compounding variables. And I also collected using the artificial vagina method. So as you can see here, we've got this female, she is on heat. We allowed these bulls to come out. They mounted, and we diverted their penis into the artificial vagina and collected the ejaculate through that mechanism. So that allows me to collect the most natural density and motility for these bulls. We also let them jump 3 times, so that's cleaning out their reproductive system, collecting as much sperm as we can from these boys. And that allowed me to pull them together and then separate them into the different glycerol and time treatments that I studied before. Initially on farm, we conduct a crush site assessment. So this is a motility and a density assessment to make sure that what we're taking back to the lab is viable for processing and that it is going to be able to be used back out in AI. Before traveling though, we also dilute it 1-to-1 with our A diluent. So that's a very basic cryoprotectant. It has minimal glycerol to coat the sperm during that first reduction in temperature to 4 degrees. It also has antibiotics and a little bit of energy to keep the sperm alive and motile until we get back to the lab. So once back at the lab, we conduct a computer-assisted semen analysis, or a CASA. So this is a computer-generated motility and density number that we get. It also will generate a number of dilution, so like how much more of diluent B can we add and how far can we extend this out without compromising the motility of the sperm post-thaw. We also look at the morphology of the sperm cell, so looking at the membranes and making sure everything is intact. There's no obvious deformations that are going to negatively influence a pregnancy. So this is pretty much how I set up my experiment back in the lab once we got back there. So as you can see, I've got my subsample 1, 2, and 3, which is my timings. And then furthermore, we separated into high glycerol and low glycerol levels. So in the subsample 1, we had full dilution. So we added all of the diluent to the samples. They were stored and frozen. In the second sample, we separated the diluent B into thirds. So the first was added at 0 minutes, the second third was added at 10, and the third at 20. And the same was done for subsample 3, but just at 20-minute intervals instead of 10. So once the semen is frozen, put through that pre-programmed freezer, and then we have stored it in the liquid nitrogen. We took 3 straws from each of those treatments, and we thawed them in a warm water flask at 34 degrees for 60 seconds. So this is a snippet of a video post-thaw about what we're sort of looking for in this CASA analysis. So as you can see up here, we have these sperm. They are very progressively motile. They don't have any obvious abnormalities that we're looking for it to be unviable. However, we do have this little guy up here. As you can see, he's a bit of a slow swimmer and also has a proximal droplet on his tail, so he is not going to be fertilizing any eggs. As is this one here, which is an obvious dead sperm cell, and this little guy here. He is motile, however not very progressively, and so you could definitely say that that was caused by cold shock somewhere during the freezing process. So once we collated all of those motility data, we ran it through, as I said, in a general linear model with glycerol and glycerol and time as the fixed effects. We came out with glycerol having a p-value of 0.05118. So that's approaching significance and definitely worth further investigating. However, the equilibration time did not have a very significant value, so whether that's because of the lack of replication that I was able to provide in this study is yet to be determined. So as you can see here, we have a higher average motility for the high glycerol, so that was definitely going against what I thought because of the spermatoxic effects of high glycerol content. And the low glycerol did have a lower average motility, but the distribution across all of them is fairly similar, so that was also pretty interesting to have a look at. So in summary, the equilibration time was not a significant factor for post-thaw motility. However, glycerol was approaching significance, and I would definitely love to have a look at that further. And there was no interaction or relationship between glycerol and equilibration time on that post-thaw motility. Replication is definitely something I would like to look into, so increasing the amount of balls that we're able to use within this program. So that was something I would definitely change in further projects. And this was extremely species specific. So I was using black Wagyu, who are extremely fertile species. So it would be interesting to conduct this on, say, Brahman bulls who are subfertile and see what sort of reaction we will get from using different glycerol and equilibration times on their post-thaw motility. And to bring this out and use it in real application in collection facilities today is to use a test freeze for individual preferences. So taking a bull sample, freezing it in a variety of conditions, so a variety of glycerol levels and equilibration times, and coming out and seeing, okay, what is the best motility, freezing him using that method through the rest of his time at the collection, and from there we're going to be able to increase post-thaw motility and also our AI pregnancy results. Thank you very much.